Welcome to the IVF Abroad podcast for people who are struggling with infertility and trying to conceive, and who are facing more obstacles than options when it comes to having fertility testing or treatment in their home countries. Alongside other experts, I will share, educate and empower you on your journey and help you to learn more about going abroad for advanced fertility testing and treatments like IVF and egg donation. I'm Emma Haslam, your host, now mum of one, and the go-to expert in fertility treatment abroad. Since the birth of our son in 2018, I have made it my mission to make fertility treatment more informed, transparent, accessible, supported and affordable for more people. And I help people just like you to become unstuck, to find a best fit clinic that truly meets their needs, and to have fertility treatment on their terms and timescales so they can achieve their dreams of growing their families. And I'm here now to help you too. Be sure to check out the free resources in the show notes for more help after listening to today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the podcast with me, Emma Haslam. You probably know by listening to this podcast, or perhaps you follow me over on Instagram, or maybe you're new here, welcome. My mission, which has been the same mission since I founded my business, Your IVF Abroad, with my husband back in 2018, has been to make reproductive healthcare and fertility care more transparent, more supported, and more accessible for more people. And for people, no matter where they are on their journey. So those people who are trying to conceive naturally and are struggling, through to people who are planning to have things like advanced testing, IVF, donor conception, and then through to people who, like myself, are navigating things like perimenopause or menopause, and who are perhaps taking or exploring things like HRT. So in this episode, I want to talk to you about the options that you have for getting the medication that you need. Depending on which of those two groups you're in, you may be in both of those camps. I've worked with clients that are menopausal and are or are not taking HRT and are also on their conception journey. So this is about giving you options. This is about maybe giving you information on things that perhaps you didn't know, and about getting the medication that you need safely, with availability, affordably, and without jumping through endless hoops. Because whether it's your fertility medication, supplements, or HRT, some of the stresses are the same for people, such as cost, availability, getting medication in the first place, and where to go for help. You know, some of that is common to both. And if you've ever felt any of this, by the way, you're not alone, sadly. And hopefully this is going to be a helpful episode to you, because I'm going to walk you through an option that you've got to acquire support and medication privately and online, what the process looks like, when it might make sense to consider these routes, things like the benefits, how you can get a no obligation quote for things like fertility medication and things like HRT, and also an option of where you can get additional support from me if you're struggling with things like perimenopause or menopause symptoms and you're looking for some specialist help through a consultant abroad online to be able to help you with this and to help prescribe you things like HRT if that is what you want and if that is what is needed. So let's dive on into it. So in the first part of this podcast, I am going to talk to you about the fertility medication and supplements side of things. So if you are planning to have fertility treatment, or if you've had it in the past, you will know that with things like IVF with ICSI, you know, if you're having IVF with donor conception, etc., then medication is a huge part of the journey. And what I know to be true with, you know, working with hundreds of clients, most people don't realise, because why would you, just how expensive fertility drugs are, and also that the costs of medication also vary wildly. and how difficult availability can sometimes be, and how it's not always as simple as just going to your local pharmacy with an online prescription from an overseas clinic to buy a medication when it's not their speciality and when the prescription's from another country. So because of this, there are lots of reasons why people consider ordering their fertility medication online. The points that I've just mentioned. So cost, like buying medication privately online from a specialist fertility pharmacy, can be significantly cheaper. Even just by shopping around, first of all, you're going to save money because the prices do vary. And if you're listening to this and you're in the US, if you listen to this and you're in the UK, Ireland, other places, you can save hundreds of pounds by shopping around and hundreds of pounds by going to a specialist fertility clinic, specialist fertility pharmacy. So cost is a big one. And bearing in mind, IVF medication can be anything from kind of £500 up to £2,500. That is a lot of money. And so you want to be looking at where you can save money, but also get what you need quickly and safely. You need to bear in mind all of those things. And if you do become pregnant through assisted conception and you've had medication to support you on that journey, the likelihood is that some of those medications will carry on until you are 12 weeks pregnant. So it can end up being a substantial cost. Or if you need to have more than one cycle of fertility treatment, then you're going to be paying out for medication more than once. Now, granted, if you have a fresh cycle of IVF and then later, let's say, for example, have a frozen embryo transfer because maybe it's worked and you want to go back and try for a sibling, or maybe it hasn't worked and you want to go again, then the costs will come right down for that. But still, when we're talking about those figures, it adds up. And so shopping around is honestly essential. The other reason why people consider ordering through specialist fertility pharmacies and online services are things like availability. Fertility medication goes out of stock all the time, particularly here in the UK. Since Brexit, it is much more of a problem. And general pharmacies don't often know what those alternatives are. So if you can find a general pharmacy like Asda, for example, here in the UK, they can, from a hard copy prescription, work to get you your fertility medication. However, the experience you will have will very much depend on how often they deal with this. Like I used Asda because I didn't know there were any other options. I just knew that was an option. And there was a lot of going backwards and forwards with them and the fertility clinic to make sure that the prescription was how they wanted it to be. And then when things weren't in stock or had different names, they didn't know what or how to suggest an alternative. Medication came, it didn't come with any needles. They were like, oh, we didn't realize you needed needles. What size needles do you need? And I was like, I don't know. And so, yes, I could get it from them. And yes, they were pretty good on cost. The thing that made it really difficult was all of that toing and froing and all of that stress. And sometimes we don't have the time. And this leads me on to the next reason why people should consider using a specialist fertility pharmacy. And that is the expertise. Using somebody who just deals in fertility medication means that you are dealing with a specialist. So they're more likely to have things in stock. They're more likely to know and suggest alternatives if needed. And a lot of them can work from an electronic version of your prescription. So if you are having your fertility treatment abroad, you don't have to wait for the hard copy to be sent, which post-Brexit can take weeks to arrive. And then if things need to be changed on the prescription, then that could just leave you with no time. And sometimes they don't even need you to change the name because they can just provide an alternative. And they have this knowledge. They know when you need needles. They know what needles you need. And it just reduces the stress. And also, there is this belief that buying fertility medication through Asda in the UK is the cheapest way of doing it. I know that Asda don't make any money on fertility medication, which is admirable and it's amazing. And maybe you will consider Asda as a route for you. But that doesn't mean to say that the cost for them to acquire the drugs in the first place are cheaper than getting them elsewhere. So it's always got to be a balance of weighing up the cost they provide, perhaps comparing it to somewhere else, but also weighing up the potential hassle and time it may take to source your medication if you can get what you need from Asda. Now, I know other people who've used Asda and have had a completely different experience to me, but I've also had clients who've used Asda and have had a similar stressful experience like I have. So it's not always the cheapest. They're not always the cheapest, and they're not always the easiest to be able to deal with because it's not their speciality area. So if you want to explore sourcing medication through a specialist online pharmacy that does this every single day, then I can introduce you to a specialist pharmacy service. I'm going to link this in the show notes, and the process is super simple. So you complete a quick form, you upload your prescription from any country. So it's just an electronic upload, as long as it's written in English. And then the pharmacy will contact you directly to provide you with a quote via email or WhatsApp. And then you can decide if you want to go ahead. If you do, you'll make secure payment and the medication will then be shipped to your door. It can be with you in the UK from as little as 48 hours. And if you are in like the US, it can take up to 5 to 7 days. So I don't suggest you leave it with a 48-hour window to get in contact with the pharmacy. But, sometimes it can be with you literally as quickly as that, and you can track it through, and it's all appropriately packaged if things need to be kept cool, etc. So you can track your package and you can get it delivered to an address of your choice. So it can be super quick, safe. This is a properly registered and regulated pharmacist, and they can provide, some really, really great prices, even including shipping. If you're just after one item, it wouldn't be worth getting in contact for a quote because it wouldn't be worth paying for the shipping. Unless, of course, you cannot get that item somewhere, then it's worth it. But just so you know when it may be worth using a specialist fertility pharmacy, this one is overseas. It's not in the UK. So you would be paying for shipping costs. So it's just kind of weighing that up. But if they're not right for you, then of course you can look for specialist fertility pharmacies in this country and also compare their costs. They can be cheaper, they can be more expensive. They don't always have the availability. Sometimes they do have the availability. So I guess what I'm trying to get through here is it's always worth, if you've got the time, shopping around and getting a few different quotes and then comparing and seeing who's the cheapest, but also which service is going to be the easiest and quickest for you as well. Because you do not want any panics in trying to source last-minute medications just before you're about to start your fertility treatment. And I don't provide any support with the pharmacy, just to be clear. This is just an introduction to a trusted, fully registered specialist pharmacy. So I am an affiliate with this pharmacist. If you choose to go ahead and place an order, then I may receive a small fee for making the introduction. But if you want a free no obligation quote, then just click the link in my show notes. And then when you've got your prescription, you can go ahead and do that. So I hope you find that super helpful. I found getting medication one of the most stressful things in terms of organising my fertility treatment. So it doesn't have to be that way, I promise. So into this next part of the podcast, I really want to come back now to talking about HRT. So switching gears slightly, because the challenges around HRT are incredibly similar in terms of availability and cost and being listened to by medical professionals. And, here in the UK in particular, we've got a real problem with shortages and inconsistencies happening, and lots of people who are experiencing symptoms of perimenopause being turned away from GPs, or if they've been referred to a consultant are sat on long waiting lists like I was. And this has been happening for years, and we've got such a long way to go in terms of women's healthcare, particularly in this country and other countries I know, and particularly when it comes to things like perimenopause and menopause. And I know some of you listening, this will be something that is impacting you now. And maybe you have had support via the NHS, maybe you've had support privately, or maybe you've just been completely dismissed. And but you know that something isn't right and you really want to explore options. So if you are in any of those camps, then I feel you, I have been you, and I am now on my journey with HRT. And this isn't for me to say you should be taking HRT. I'm not medically qualified and that's not something I can advise on, but I do believe that you should be listened to and given options. And so many people just are left flailing. So if you are somebody at the moment who perhaps does have HRT prescribed, not via the NHS, or via the NHS and you're struggling with shortages, then you might want to listen to this next bit, because these are the reasons why people might consider, like you might consider looking at ordering HRT online. So availability issues are one of the top things that I hear people having difficulty with, around things like estrogen patches and gels, testosterone, etc. Mainly the patches. The cost. So if you're having to pay for a private prescription every single month and each item privately, for example, here in the UK or in America, then that really can add up really fast. And, you want the confidence of knowing that you can get the brand and the strength and the format that you're used to and that works for you. And the consistency and confidence of knowing that you'll actually have what you need each month without the stress of worrying, am I going to be able to get what I need? And it's a terrible position to be in. And then, you get people who want to be reviewed like myself for HRT and then are just being turned away and had to keep presenting back at the GPs. And it took me, to quote the NICE guidelines, to get a referral through to see a consultant, which took about 18 months. And I was really struggling with my perimenopause symptoms at that point. And in hindsight, I wish I'd have stopped and thought to myself about having a private consultation, because I think it would have been worth the money to me to get someone to just listen to me and to see if my symptoms were indeed perimenopause, which they were, bearing in mind that I was told I was in early menopause when we started trying for a baby, and when we started going through our investigations. So to then have a GP say to me, well, you're too young. I was like, what? Hang on. And they were like, we've got no record of this information. But the problem is all the IVF fertility investigations information was kind of under lock and key, I was told later. That was with the hospital, and that wasn't information the GP had access to. So I had a real battle to try and get someone to listen to me. And as I said, once I quoted the NICE guidelines, they then did refer me. But it was 18 months later when I finally saw somebody. And had they been able to access the information about my history, maybe it would have been different. And I was made to feel like I was lying because it wasn't on their records. But that's because, as I found out later, as I mentioned, that it's just under lock and key because, the hospital said the GPs weren't privy to that information. Why, I have no idea, but so frustrating. And so many of my friends and people say to me now that they think they're struggling with perimenopause and they've gone to the GPs and they've just been completely dismissed. And these can be really debilitating symptoms. They were for me. But just to have somebody at least review you properly to look at whether or not it is that, and to tell you what some of your options could be. So there's loads of reasons why people are looking for private support and why people are ordering their HRT online. So thinking about the ordering HRT online, similar to what I said in the first section of this podcast, if you have a prescription, an NHS prescription, if something isn't available to you, or if you have a private prescription and have been paying for private prescriptions and private HRT items here in like the UK or America or somewhere else, you can completely get a quote to see if you can get these items from another pharmacy if you're struggling with availability, and to see if you can get these items cheaper. Now, it might be that by getting the items shipped from abroad, you get 1 3-month prescription from your provider, so that can help with shipping costs rather than getting them shipped every month. That wouldn't be the most cost-effective way to do it. But of course, if you can't find an item, then, that's absolutely a lifeline. But if you can get 3 months worth of HRT at once, then actually the cost of the items abroad can be so much cheaper than what you're paying in like the UK and the US, that even with the shipping charges, it makes it worth it, and makes it worth it to know that you're going to have exactly what you need as well without the shortages. So you can use a prescription from any country as long as it's written in English, and the pharmacy can deliver to most places securely around the world. So whether you're with a private GP, an NHS GP, a menopause clinic outside the UK, private specialist abroad, they're all fine. Now, some pharmacies refuse prescriptions when they have come from abroad, which can cause delays and stress and potentially money to get things rewritten, if you can find somebody to do that. But the pharmacy that I will introduce you to doesn't do that. They accept prescriptions from pretty much anywhere, which removes one of the biggest obstacles. And often it can be cheaper too. As I said, if you kind of double, triple up on your prescriptions to negate the shipping charges, then often it's significantly cheaper. But the biggest value that people tell me about this service is the fact that they get peace of mind, a reliable supply, they can bulk order, they're not having to chase multiple pharmacies. And again, it's working with a specialist pharmacy who deals in a lot of HRT, so they understand it. And, they can get you the things that you need. Now, the process is exactly the same as in part 1 of the podcast, but you may have skipped to this bit when you realise that the first part was about fertility. So the process for you is you would upload your prescription. So I'll pop a link in the show notes. You fill out a short form, upload your prescription. You then get a quote from the pharmacy via email or WhatsApp. And then you can decide if you want to go ahead or not. And if you do, you can make secure payment, and then the medication will be shipped and can be with you as quickly as within 48 hours, up to 7 days, depending on the country that you live in and timings, etc. This, as I mentioned before, is purely an introduction service. So this isn't a service that I offer, but I make the introduction via the link that I will put in the show notes. There's no pressure or anything like that. It's just a way for you to get a no obligation quote to compare and access the medication that you need. So I will pop that link in the show notes for you. Now, I just mentioned before as well that there will be some people listening to this perhaps who don't have HRT, but would like to be considered for HRT, or just want to know what options might be available. They know that they want to speak to a specialist. Maybe they're feeling lost with perimenopause symptoms, or GPs aren't taking you seriously, or you can't access things like testosterone, or the NHS waiting list is too long. Whatever it is, if you are looking to kind of speak to a specialist, a qualified consultant, obstetrician, gynecologist with, extensive menopause experience, and you want an online private consultation with one of them, who can then go on to prescribe you with the medication that you need if needed, and can help with things like private blood testing in your home countries, then please do get in touch, because you can book a call with me. It's a new service that I offer where I can talk you through how the process works and then link you up with a doctor overseas who can help you. They can assess your symptoms. They can give you options. They can prescribe HRT if needed. They will prescribe your prescriptions, and then you can have the medication delivered to you at home via a specialist pharmacy. It can be cheaper as well by doing it via a consultant abroad, especially when you kind of add up if you need multiple consultations, if you are getting a lot of medication, etc. But also if you are struggling with finding someone that offers this service, then this is why it's something I've wanted to bring to the table for you, because it's something that I'm hearing from people more and more, and people asking me for help with. So I really hope that this episode has given you some helpful information, no matter where you are on your journey, whether you are in the fertility journey, whether you're navigating perimenopause, menopause, or you're somewhere in between both. Then, getting the medication that you need should not be one of the hardest parts of the process. Like, you deserve clarity, you deserve reliability and fast, uncomplicated access to what your body needs. without delays, without unnecessary costs, and without unnecessary stress, because all of this is stressful enough without having additional worries. So everything I've mentioned is linked in the show notes as well. And if this episode helped, please share it with somebody else who may need to hear it. And I will see you for the next one next week. Bye. If you are facing more obstacles than options and want to learn more about how to overcome your fertility testing and treatment challenges in your home country so that you too can fast track to growing your family and on your terms, then check out my free training at yourivfabroad.co.uk/free masterclass. Don't forget to rate and subscribe so you don't miss an episode and so that I can reach and help more people. Thanks for listening.